You want to level the daggers in Albion Online and you quickly find out they are very PvP centered weapons. You try to look up some PvE guides and discover they're either outdated or even worse, they tell you to use other weapons and level your daggers with fame credits. Lucky for you, I got you covered in today's guide in which I show you 3 great ways to level your daggers in Albion Online. All 3 methods can be done solo and you can start with them fairly safely in the blue zone already. Of course, if you want higher levels of fame, you will have to advance to the yellow, red and black zones where these builds are just as strong. You don't need high masteries to get started with today's builds, so even if you are a new player or someone who's never played the daggers before, you will be able to follow along and get going right away. Even if you aren't interested in daggers specifically, all of the builds I share today are very good at their respective contents. And the different methods I share with you today make for a lot of fame and silver, which can be done fairly safely. So it might still be worth checking them out if you're looking for a great build in general or new ways to farm lots of fame and silver on your own. Before I get to the methods, I first want to inform you on how you can make extra silver, loot and fame whilst going about these contents in the Royal Continent. If you don't care about this, feel free to skip this chapter, but I don't want to repeat this with each method, so I'll just do it once right now. By faction flagging, you will be farming faction points as you go about doing all of today's content in the Royal Continent. You can then buy various rewards with your points that you can sell to other players. You will also benefit from the faction buff, which can make for 15% more fame, silver and loot rewards, which simply makes all of today's content even better and more rewarding. Even if you get knocked down in the blue and yellow zones whilst faction flagged, you will not lose any of your gear or items, therefore it doesn't impact your gameplay too much, whilst the extra rewards are massive. Honestly, I don't see a reason why you wouldn't faction flag whilst going about today's content, especially when you do it in the blue and yellow zones, where it's really safe anyway. The first way to level your daggers in a very easy way is by doing solo dungeons. Although this always was an option to level your daggers, doing solo dungeons with the dagger weapons was pretty underwhelming compared to other weapons within the game. However, after the newest dagger, the Demon Fang, was introduced, it opened up a new and viable way for players to level their daggers within solo dungeons. I've been playing this build for the last couple days myself and I really enjoy it for this content. There is just something fun and different about the playstyle of this build that I really like. I think it's because of the damage over time the Demon Fang makes for, which you can use repeatedly, which is a pretty unique thing because normally the E abilities have a rather long cooldown and you can only use them every other pack if you are lucky. But with the Demon Fang you can use your E ability on every single pack of mobs throughout the dungeon, making for very fast clears. I tested this build out on a new character to make sure you don't have energy or sustain issues whatsoever and that you clear the dungeons in a timely manner. And the build I ended up going for is actually a very solid bruiser build that's also great for party and PvP play as well. So not only will you be leveling your daggers with this build, but you will also be leveling a strong bruiser build that's great to have in other contents, which is massive because this way you're actually being very efficient within your efforts. The reason I took the Helion jacket for this build is because it makes you a bit more tanky since it's leather, so you'll have an easier time surviving the mobs. Even more so because the lifesteal aura, as the name already says, drains life from the enemies around you. And the less HP you have, the more life you will be stealing. So if you don't panic, you can utilize this ability for huge sustain, but also greater damage. Since you are draining the life from your enemies, they will be losing it. So not only are you using the lifesteal aura for sustain, but you're also doing damage with it at the same time. Very great ability that will make your runs much easier and faster. Now, since I didn't have energy issues with this build, I figured I might as well take the Stalker Hood and the Thetford Cape. And these two items add a lot of damage to this build. The cape will add AoE damage to your auto attacks on a very low cooldown, and the Stalker Hood will boost your damage when you use it. You want to use your hood when the mobs are below 50% health, so that you benefit from the resistance debuff it provides. However, when it's a matter of killing bosses, what I like to do is use it once at the start of the fight, and by the time they are below 50% health, use it once again. Since boss fights take longer compared to mob packs, you can use your hood more often. The reason I like Assassin Shoes for solo dungeons is because you can use Refreshing Sprint during your run, which is great to speed things up, and whenever you need an extra iframe, you can swap to dodge. Some bosses do a lot of damage which you can't avoid, so the Assassin Shoes are a big help in that. One final tip I want to share is that you can also kill roaming mobs in the open world with this build, so if you see any whilst walking to or from your dungeon, feel free to kill them for the extra silver and fame. Now you could also slap on a Bloodletter instead of the Demon Fang and go with the exact same build and do your solo dungeons like that, but I do think the Demon Fang is a much better option for this content as you can use your E ability more often, making for much faster clears. Nonetheless, if you want to level the Bloodletter specifically, it is a viable option. The second way to level your daggers is by doing static and group dungeons, which is something you can do on your own with the build I'm going to provide you next. Although these contents are normally meant for groups of players, this dagger build makes it possible for you to solo them, so it's no surprise that this content makes for a lot of fame. Even in the blue zones where you have tier 4 static and group dungeons, you can still get a lot of fame for doing them. And since there is no PvP feature in the blue zone, you can literally progress in a safe way by doing this. Although players can PvP in the yellow zone, you do not lose your gear when you lose a battle, so doing this content even in the yellow zone is really safe, which makes this method not only safe, but also a very rewarding one for any player that wants to level their daggers or farm fame in general. Since you are fully safe when doing these contents in the blue and yellow zones, it also means you can go with the highest tiers of gear, so based on the gear you can afford, you can be much stronger in these contents. Now you don't need 8.3 gear per se, as I had an easy time with just tier 8 gear myself, but the higher your gear is, the easier and quicker it will be, and the more fame you will make. You can even bring an 8.3 Master Beast satchel if you have the silver, and get double the fame whilst farming. The third method to level your daggers or farm lots of fame in general is by killing roaming mobs in the open world. Now this is something you can always do with whatever build you want when going about doing content. Whenever you spot a highly evolved mob, there is very little reason not to kill them. They make for insane amounts of fame in a very short amount of time. But these mobs can be pretty tough to kill. You can even have difficulties with some of them despite being in very good gear. The evolved ones simply spam a lot of abilities and do enormous amounts of damage, so you have to be very careful. One thing that helps massively in this content is having a high sustain build, and when it comes to daggers, this is the build you want to have when you want to hunt evolved mobs in the open world. This build makes for a lot of sustain, allowing you to kill even the highest evolved mobs successfully. Since this build has a lot of single target damage on top of that, it's very quick at killing, which is very important in the red and black zones, where you want to spend as little time on the ground as possible. Now this build can be played in multiple ways, and the one I show you today is more aggressive and damage focused, but you can also play it more defensively with a focus on surviving in the open world. If you want to play this build in the blue and yellow zones, you obviously want to go with the high damage one I just shared, as you will be fully safely. But if you decide to play it in the red and black zones and want more survivability, you want to go with a defensive one. With a few minor adjustments, you can make that happen and rotate between safe and unsafe areas at your own pace. Nonetheless, this is a great way to level your daggers and farm lots of fame in general. The silver the mobs drop is on the higher end as well, and as said at the start of this video, if you do these contents in the Royal Continent, you can faction flag for even greater rewards. So you can do solo dungeons with the Demon Fang build, you can do static and group dungeons with the one-handed dagger build, or you can hunt highly evolved mobs in the open world. Whichever you choose, if you do them in the Royal Continent, you can faction flag for extra rewards. And since you will be safe in the blue and yellow zones, you can bring the best gear that you have. These three methods will make for great progress in fame, silver and loot, and help you with leveling your daggers. If you learned anything at all from this video, make sure to give it a like. Good luck on your journey, and I'll see you next time.